Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. Intimacy's not a priority right now, she said. Just like that, between sips of her Starbucks latte and the soft glow of her iPhone screen. We were sitting in the office kitchen, late evening, the lights half off, her tone casual, like she was rearranging her calendar, not our marriage. I didn't argue. I just nodded. That was the night something inside me went silent. Her name's Emily. My wife. PR director of our design studio. The one I built from nothing. The one I trusted her to shape, to humanize, to bring into the world's light. And the man sitting across from her lately, at every brainstorming session, was Jason, my lead designer, my right hand. The guy who called me brother when we launched our first project. They'd stay late, pitching ideas, laughing. Sometimes I'd walk by the conference room and see the way she leaned in when he spoke. At first, I told myself it was nothing, professional chemistry, a shared rhythm. But the more I looked, the more I noticed what wasn't there. She'd stopped asking me to dinner. Her perfume had changed, lighter, sharper. And the silence at home was different. Not heavy, controlled. Like she'd already rewritten the script and I just hadn't caught up. That night, when she said it, intimacy's not a priority right now, I realized I'd been removed from her list long before she spoke the words. So I did the same. The next morning, I showed up early. Earlier than anyone. I unlocked the studio, made coffee in my old travel mug, the one with the cracked handle, and started drafting a new layout for the entire team structure. Jason's projects? Reassigned. Emily's campaigns? On hold for evaluation. I didn't make announcements. Didn't raise my voice. I just moved pieces. Quietly. Precisely. By the time she arrived, Starbucks in hand, hair perfect, pretending not to notice me, I'd already begun removing her influence from the system she thought she controlled. She glanced at me across the glass partition, confused. Jason came in 10 minutes later, laughing, holding 2 coffees. He froze when he saw her already holding one. I didn't say a word, but I saw his face drop, just slightly. The kind of subtle panic only someone guilty feels when the room suddenly gets colder. By noon, the studio was quiet. Even the hum of the air conditioner sounded like it was watching. That night, I didn't go home. I parked my Ford F-150 near the coast, opened my laptop, and rebuilt everything. The brand, the direction, the core team. No anger, no revenge, just strategy. By the time she texted, "Are you coming home?" I was already somewhere else. Mentally, emotionally, professionally. I didn't block her. Didn't respond. Just watched the screen light up, then fade back to black. That was the first move. Silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was the beginning of the shift. The moment I stopped being convenient and started being untouchable. I started noticing how quiet the studio felt when I walked in. Not awkward quiet. More like waiting for something quiet. The kind that makes people lower their voices without knowing why. Jason had stopped joking around in the mornings. Emily had stopped wearing her usual confidence. They both sensed something shifting, but neither could trace it back to me. That's the beauty of silence. It moves without leaving fingerprints. Every Thursday, we used to have team lunches at Olive Garden. Emily loved those. She said they helped build culture. But when I canceled the next one, claiming we had to tighten scheduling for Q4, she didn't argue. She just looked at me across the meeting table like she wanted to ask something, but couldn't find the words. Jason avoided eye contact completely. I watched them carefully, not out of jealousy, but precision. Every detail mattered now. Who lingered in whose office, how long the messages stayed unread on Slack. The tone shifts when I entered a room. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. The day I got confirmation wasn't dramatic. It was almost boring. Jason had left his MacBook on the conference table, open, when he ran out for lunch. I didn't mean to look, but the notifications popped up on the screen, 3 texts, all from Emily. Short ones. Familiar ones. One said, "You handled that pitch perfectly." I couldn't stop thinking about it. I just stood there, reading it once. Then I closed the laptop, carried it to his desk, and kept walking. My pulse didn't even change. I already knew. That evening, I stayed late. Alone. I turned off every light except the one above my desk. Opened our shared Google Drive and started reviewing projects, budgets, client lists. I noticed something else. Jason had been listed as the primary contact on deals I'd originally closed myself. Subtle, quiet changes that redirected credit without making noise. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about trust, about being blindsided not in the heart, but in the work that carried my name. When I finally left the studio, it was past midnight. I drove through empty streets, the hum of the car blending with thoughts that refused to settle. I stopped by a 24-hour Walmart, grabbed a pack of cold brew and a notebook, and sat in the parking lot, sketching a new structure, one that didn't include either of them. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. By the time the sun came up, I decided exactly how to make both of them irrelevant without a single confrontation. And that was when it hit me. People fear anger, but they never see detachment coming. The next few weeks felt like a slow burn. Nobody saw the fire, but everyone started feeling the heat. I stopped joining meetings unless absolutely necessary. I let Emily run her presentations alone, and I let Jason handle client calls without my input. What neither of them noticed was that I was quietly rerouting everything behind the scenes: contracts, accounts, vendor communications, all flowing back through me again, just not through them. I didn't need confrontation. I needed control. The first domino fell when a long-term client asked about Jason's sudden promotion in their invoice thread. I replied calmly, explaining that Jason was stepping back to focus on internal design processes and that I'd be personally managing their project. The client responded with relief, not suspicion. That was the first clean cut. At home, Emily kept her distance. She moved through the house like a guest, careful, polite, pretending to be busy. I matched her silence perfectly. No arguments. No questions. Just quiet withdrawal. She'd come in late, scroll her phone, maybe laugh once in a while at something I wasn't part of. One night, I heard her in the kitchen on a call. Her voice dropped lower, softer. Then silence. Then a quick goodnight. The kind of tone that only sounds natural when it's meant for someone else. The next morning, I made breakfast, set a cup of coffee on the counter, and left before she woke up. No notes. No words. Just an empty chair across the table where she used to sit. At the studio, I called an all-hands meeting. Announced a restructuring initiative. Nobody saw it coming. Jason's name wasn't on the new org chart. Emily's department was being absorbed into external partnerships. I spoke clearly, without emotion. Everyone nodded, even the ones who secretly knew what was happening. The beauty of professionalism is that it masks every personal wound with PowerPoint and polite applause. After the meeting, Jason came to my office, asked if he should clarify his position. I told him no clarification was necessary. His voice cracked when he said, "I thought we were building this together." I just looked at him, steady, and said, "We were," then went back to my laptop. He stood there for a moment before walking out, the door clicking shut like punctuation. That night, Emily texted, "Everyone's asking questions. What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her message and thought about how strange it felt to finally be ahead of both of them. She used to say I wasn't spontaneous enough. But what she never realized was that silence can be the most unpredictable thing in the world. I disappeared without leaving. That's the best way I can describe it. I stopped being available, not physically, but mentally, emotionally, strategically. I became a shadow in my own space. People still saw me, but they couldn't reach me anymore. Emily tried to act as if everything was normal. She'd pass me in the hallway, ask about upcoming launches, try to start conversations about team morale. I gave her calm, professional answers. Nothing personal. No warmth. The silence between us had evolved. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was tactical. Jason, though, started breaking down faster. I could see it in the way he avoided eye contact, the nervous energy in his laugh. He was working overtime, trying to prove his worth, to recover the authority he didn't realize I had already taken back from him. I let him run in circles. He was his own undoing now. The moment that changed everything happened late one Friday night. I was reviewing invoices when I noticed something odd. Jason had approved a payment to an external vendor without authorization. The name on the invoice was familiar, Emily's college friend. A PR consultant. I cross-checked the numbers. She'd been double paid. Not by much, but enough to leave a trail. It wasn't about money. It was about alignment. About trust. About what happens when emotional boundaries bleed into professional ones. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I drafted a memo. Simple, factual, detached. Send it to HR, copied legal, and attach the receipts. No names, no accusations. Just data. I knew what it would start. By Monday morning, the studio was in chaos. HR held quiet meetings. Legal reviewed contracts. Jason looked pale. Emily spent half the day behind closed doors. I walked past their offices like a ghost. Calm, collected, untouched. That afternoon, she followed me to the parking lot. The air was heavy, the kind that makes even silence sound loud. She asked if I had anything to do with what was happening. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. Her expression shifted from anger to something close to fear, not of me, but of losing control. That night, I drove the car out to the coast again. I watched the city lights fade in the distance. My phone buzzed with messages from the studio. People asking for clarity, direction, leadership. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not triumph, just stillness. Emily once said I didn't know how to make a statement. She was wrong. The best statement is the one no one sees coming, until it's already done. When the investigation started, I said nothing. I didn't have to. The numbers, the emails, the timestamps, they spoke louder than I ever could. Jason tried to explain it as an accounting mistake. Emily tried to distance herself from the vendor entirely, but it was too late. Once the pattern was visible, no one could unsee it. I watched it unfold from the corner office that used to be ours. The same room where we'd once stayed late planning campaigns, laughing over takeout, dreaming big. Now, it was a battleground of silence and unspoken consequences. I didn't raise my voice or make demands. I just signed the documents that moved their responsibilities elsewhere. Each signature was like a quiet nail sealing the lid on what used to be. Jason resigned first. No farewell speech, no goodbye drinks, just a short email sent at 2:47 p.m. I read it once and archived it. He packed up his desk while most of the team pretended not to watch. Emily didn't say a word to him as he left. The car pulled out of the parking lot, and with it went the last person who knew her truth. That evening, she stood by my office door. She didn't step inside. She just looked at me, waiting for something, a question, a reaction, maybe even anger. But I had none left to give. She used to know my every expression. Now she couldn't read a single thing on my face. At home, the distance was physical now. She stayed in the guest room, said it was temporary. I didn't argue. She cooked once in a while, left her phone face down on the counter, acted like everything was just busy, not broken. I went through the motions, but my mind was somewhere else, on expansion plans, new partnerships, the clean version of what our business could have been. A week later, one of our biggest clients reached out privately. They wanted to continue working with me directly, not through her department. I accepted without hesitation. That call changed everything. For the first time, the company was entirely mine again. No shared influence, no blurred lines. When I got home that night, she asked if I'd heard from Jason. I told her no. She smiled like she didn't believe me. Then she said, "You've changed." I looked at her and thought, no, I just stopped waiting for you to notice me. I didn't say it out loud. Some truths don't need sound. They just echo in the quiet after you've taken everything back. The silence around her started spreading. It's strange how fast isolation works when respect quietly evaporates. People at the studio stopped seeking her approval. Meetings went on without her input. Her once bright voice, the one that used to fill the room with direction, now sounded unsure, almost foreign. She didn't notice at first, but I did. The air had shifted, and everyone could feel it. The first public crack came during a client dinner. She arrived late, nervous, trying to regain her old rhythm. The client, a sharp woman who had worked with us for years, asked where Jason was. Emily froze, laughed softly, said he'd moved on. Then the client looked at me and said, "Good. He wasn't representing your vision right." It was a small moment, almost nothing. But I saw how it landed on Emily. She tried to smile, but her eyes told the story. She finally realized she'd lost the one thing she thought she controlled, perception. After that night, she began trying too hard. Staying later at the studio, sending long emails to clients, proposing ideas that felt forced. The team didn't reject her. They just stopped engaging. Her words fell flat in rooms that used to echo with her authority. That's what true social fallout looks like. No confrontation, just polite dismissal. I wasn't cruel. I answered her questions, gave feedback, kept everything professional. But every conversation between us carried that invisible wall. She was reaching out, trying to connect, and I was already on the other side. At home, she'd started sitting next to me on the couch again, small steps, like testing the temperature of water she'd once drowned in. One night, she asked if I wanted to watch something on Netflix, said we hadn't done that in a while. I said maybe later and went to work in my office. She stared at the blank TV screen long after I left the room. The next morning, she was up early, dressed neatly, her perfume faint but familiar. She tried to make small talk about the day ahead. I just nodded. She looked at me then, really looked, and I could see something break behind her calm face. The realization that I wasn't angry anymore, that I'd simply moved on inside myself. That's the part people never expect. Anger fades, indifference stays, and nothing cuts deeper than being met with quiet clarity from someone you once thought would never stop caring. It's almost poetic how quickly a person becomes invisible once their power fades. Emily started walking through the office like a ghost, smiling, greeting people, pretending not to notice the quiet spaces opening around her. Conversations paused when she entered a room, then resumed once she left. She tried to join group discussions, but her voice no longer carried weight. She wasn't the leader anymore. She was a reminder. I didn't gloat. I didn't interfere. I simply let reality do what truth always does. It exposes. The company had evolved past her, and she was the last to realize it. That's the cruelty of slow isolation. It doesn't happen all at once. It eats away piece by piece, until even the smallest gesture feels foreign. At home, the distance had a different texture now. She was polite, almost careful, as if trying to rebuild something without knowing where to start. One night, I came home late from a meeting. She was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 glasses of wine already poured. Her eyes were tired, but not from lack of sleep, from trying too hard to hold on to something that was already gone. She said she wanted to talk, that we'd both changed, that maybe it was time to find our rhythm again. I just listened. Her words sounded rehearsed, like a PR statement crafted to manage a crisis. The irony didn't escape me. She was still treating our marriage like a campaign, a brand that needed saving. I told her calmly that things weren't broken, they'd just shifted, that we were both still here, just not in the same way. She looked at me as if I'd spoken another language. I saw the confusion, the hurt, and the dawning awareness that the version of me she once managed emotionally was gone. The next morning, she didn't come into work. No message, no explanation. I didn't ask. I focused on a new pitch deck, a new client, a new team rhythm that no longer revolved around her. When she finally returned 2 days later, the look in her eyes was different, softer, uncertain. That was when I knew she'd begun to understand. This wasn't punishment. It was consequence. And as I watched her sit quietly in the break room, staring at her untouched Starbucks cup, I realized something simple yet final. She was finally feeling what I'd felt months ago, being present, yet completely unseen. The first time she really broke was subtle. It happened in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, the kind that feels endless. Emails, client calls, meetings stacked one after another. I was walking past the glass conference room when I saw her sitting there alone. No phone, no laptop, just her reflection staring back at her. The woman who once commanded every space now looked like someone trying to remember how it felt to belong in one. She'd been excluded from a project review earlier that morning. Not intentionally, just naturally. The team hadn't even realized they hadn't copied her on the invite. She found out after it ended, and for the first time, I think she understood what exile without distance feels like. Later that day, she came to my office. She didn't knock. She just stood there and said she didn't recognize me anymore. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired, almost pleading. I told her quietly that maybe that was the point, that I'd stopped trying to be recognized by her a long time ago. She didn't say anything after that, just nodded once and left. That night, I didn't go home. I drove out toward the hills, parked the car, and watched the city from a distance. The skyline flickered like static, and for a while, I just sat there listening to the hum of everything I'd rebuilt. It was peaceful, but also lonely in a way that felt earned. When I finally got back home, the house was dim. She was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the TV without watching. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the table next to her. She didn't look up when I walked in. Just said quietly that she'd run into one of our old clients at Target earlier that evening. They'd asked how she was doing, and she didn't know what to say. It hit me then. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She was confessing. She was realizing what happens when you lose not just someone's love, but their faith in you. I told her I was going to bed. As I walked away, she whispered something I barely caught. Something like, "I miss who we were." I paused, but I didn't turn around. Some silences aren't meant to be broken. They're meant to echo. And that echo, I think, was the first time she truly heard herself. The unraveling came slowly, like a building losing power floor by floor. Emily started missing deadlines, forgetting meetings, losing focus. The woman who once managed entire campaigns now struggled to answer simple emails. People noticed. They didn't mock her. They just moved on, leaving her behind in silence she'd once imposed on others. One morning, I arrived early and found her in the break room. She was sitting with a blank notebook open in front of her, a cup of cold Starbucks coffee untouched beside it. She looked up at me, searching for something. Maybe help, maybe forgiveness, but I had nothing left to give her. I simply asked if she was okay. She said she was fine, but her voice cracked halfway through the word. That day, she left early. I saw her car pull out of the parking lot slowly, like someone driving without a destination. Hours later, I got a text. "You don't have to hate me." I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because hate was too small a word for what had existed between us. What we had wasn't anger. It was a graveyard of everything we once believed in. Days passed, then weeks. The studio kept running smoothly, the way I designed it to. Clean systems, clear lines, no dependency. I'd built the independence I once thought we'd share, only now it belonged to me alone. One night, I came home late and found her sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by old photos. Us, the studio launch, Jason in the background, smiling in ways that looked different now. She didn't notice me at first. She was holding one picture in particular, her and me on opening day, her arm around me, both of us exhausted but alive with purpose. She said quietly, "I ruined it, didn't I?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching her come apart under the weight of her own memories. She looked smaller somehow, softer. Not the woman who betrayed me, but the one who used to believe in us. For a moment, I almost said something, anything, to fill the silence between us. But I didn't, because I realized she needed this silence more than she needed my forgiveness. Every loss has its own rhythm. Hers was slow, deliberate, honest. She wasn't fighting anymore, just realizing. And maybe that's the real punishment, when you finally see the truth and know it's already too late to fix it. The day everything settled, it wasn't dramatic. No final confrontation, no shouting, no tears. Just stillness. The kind that only comes after every storm has passed, and there's nothing left to destroy. I came downstairs that morning to find her sitting at the kitchen table, dressed neatly, a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked calm, too calm. She said she wanted to talk. Not to explain, not to defend, but to acknowledge. She admitted she'd crossed lines she didn't even recognize at the time. She said she'd confused connection with control, admiration with loyalty. Her words were quiet, deliberate, like she'd rehearsed them for weeks. I listened, not because I was curious, but because it felt right to give her that final space to speak. She said she missed how things used to be, when we built together, dreamed together, believed in the same direction. I told her that what we'd had wasn't destroyed overnight. It eroded, little by little. Every secret, every half-truth, every time she looked past me instead of toward me. It wasn't betrayal that ended us. It was neglect disguised as ambition. She nodded, tears in her eyes, but no excuses left. I could see she understood now what real loss feels like when there's no one left to blame but yourself. She said she wanted to try again, to rebuild, to earn back what she'd broken. And for the first time in months, I believed her sincerity. But sincerity doesn't erase the distance. It just names it. I told her we could start over, but not as we were. That if we were going to move forward, it had to be under new rules. No illusions, no manipulation, no pretending that love survives on autopilot. Respect first. Truth always. She didn't argue. She just whispered, "I'll follow your lead this time." I stood up, finished my coffee, and looked out the window. The world outside looked the same, but it felt different, quieter, sharper, cleaner. I wasn't the man she once knew, the one who waited, explained, hoped. That version of me was gone, buried under months of silence and clarity. When I finally turned back to her, I didn't smile, but I didn't walk away either. I just said, "Then we start with honesty." She nodded slowly, like someone stepping into the cold for the first time, realizing it's still survivable. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace, not from winning, but from finally standing in a space built on truth. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.